The Godfather was an instant success upon release, winning awards, breaking records, and putting both the cast and crew's name on the map. Naturally, Paramount wanted to capitalize on this success, and a sequel was immediately put into production. Mario Puzo, the writer of the novel and co-writer of the screenplay, seemed to have been confident in The Godfather's success on the big screen, as he had already begun working on a screenplay for Part 2. Immediately, the direction this sequel was headed in was made obvious by the working title, The Death of Michael Corleone. A couple weeks ago, I looked at the first installment in the legendary Godfather Trilogy. Needless to say, I was beyond impressed, and I finally understood what the hype was about. As well regarded as The Godfather is, Part 2 almost matches it in that respect, which is unheard of at this level. There are sequels that are as good, if not better, than the originals. However, for it to match an all-time classic is remarkable. The Godfather Part 2 currently ranks 4th in the IMDb Top 250 list with a score of 9 out of 10. It's often regarded as the single greatest sequel of all time and a masterpiece in its own right. Now, I can already tell that I'm probably going to enjoy this movie a great deal. The question isn't whether or not it lives up to the legacy left behind by the original. The real question is whether or not it surpasses it. As was previously mentioned, Puzo began working on the script before the original Godfather even released. Both Puzo and Coppola had a vision for this film from the start. It was to be both a sequel and prequel. Vito and Michael are similar ages during their respective stories, but they face vastly different dilemmas. These separate stories are intercut in order to juxtapose the rise of the Corleone family under Vito to the fall of the Corleone family under Michael. That was the idea anyway. We'll get into whether or not it succeeds in that endeavor later on. While still having an active hand in the writing process and also taking on the role of producer, Coppola didn't want to direct Godfather Part 2. Instead, he went to Paramount recommending a talented young director who only had one notable film at the time. Paramount refused Coppola's request, instead recommending that he direct it himself. As for the young director, he would go on to establish himself not only as a competent director, but one of the greatest to ever live. His name is Martin Scorsese. Either way though, Coppola is an extremely talented director and knew these characters in this world a bit better, so it's probably for the best that he handled the sequel. Since the movie is a sequel, you would think the casting process would be easy. However, that was not the case. Immediately, actors made various demands during negotiations for their return, ranging from increased salaries to script changes. For the most part, everyone returned from the original, despite some tensions between Coppola and Pacino, which were quickly resolved. One character that did not return was Peter Clemenza, played by Richard Castellano. The exact reason this was the case is debated, with the story initially being that Castellano wanted to write all of Clemenza's dialogue, which producers couldn't agree to, although this has since been denied by Castellano's wife. Clemenza was then quickly written out of the story and replaced by Frank Pantangeli, played by Michael Gazzo. Honestly, I am glad this happened, as Clemenza's arc in this story seems very out of character, and Gazzo does a great job in the role, so much so that he was even nominated for an Academy Award. As for the budget, you would expect an increase from the $6 to $7 million Coppola was allocated for the original Godfather, especially given the success of that film. However, he ended up getting around the same amount. On set, he was given free rein though, and this made the cost rise to somewhere in the $11 to $15 million range. Given what the script calls for, I don't think the budget near doubling could have been helped. Actors demanded more money, sets became more elaborate, more extras were needed, more special effects were required, and the film was also longer than the original. Because of the dual prequel-sequel nature, it was essentially like making two films at once, so the budget doubling makes sense when viewed through that lens. Coppola having free rein on set made filming a breeze though. As was mentioned, he had a vision and a plan to execute it. Without studio execs getting his way every 5 minutes, he was able to do just that. One aspect Paramount did push back on though was the title. Coppola insisted that the film was simply titled The Godfather Part II. At the time, sequels often had completely unique titles. Sometimes a subtitle was added, but very rarely was a number used. The Godfather changed this status quo as numbering sequels became more and more common as time went on. Nowadays, both subtitles and numbered sequels are common, and this likely wouldn't be the case without The Godfather Part II. Now in the post-production stage, editing began on The Godfather Part II. Fast forward to 3 weeks before release, and it was shown to film critics and journalists. Immediately, it was pronounced a disaster. Now with only 3 weeks remaining, Coppola and the editors went in and changed the entire narrative structure. They made the cuts between Vito and Michael's stories less frequent, allowing the audience time to become invested in each individual narrative. Reportedly, the film still wasn't quite completed upon release though. That didn't seem to bother either audiences or critics, as The Godfather Part II was both a financial and critical success. While financially it didn't quite reach the heights of Part 1, it was still a massive success in its own right. Critics loved it and was nominated for 11 Academy Awards, winning 6. While it was obviously appreciated at the time, The Godfather Part II has only received more and more praise as time goes on. with it often being lauded as the single greatest sequel of all time. Let's see if that's the case. The film opens with a short scene picking up right where we left off in part 1. After a title card though, we're transported into the past. The first 10 minutes follow the events of Vito Corleone's childhood and how he came to New York. To say Vito came from humble beginnings would be an understatement. A mob boss in Sicily killed his father for disobeying him, then killed his brother for seeking revenge. When trying to finally make peace with the man, Vito's mother is killed as well. Left with nothing and no one to care for him, Vito flees to America at the age of 9. There he's renamed and quarantined. This further proves that he truly has no one. Not a single person here took pity on him, and they didn't even care enough to get his name right. Him being physically isolated drives this point home even further. This whole opening section is very well done visually. There's a shot that calls back to a moment from the original Godfather, and the scene where Vito's put in his cell has 2 shots I love. The first is Vito looking out the window. The composition is beautiful and functional, allowing us to see both Vito's perspective and his expression. It also contrasts the promised liberty when one comes to America with the confinement Vito now endures. The following shot is amazing too. Young Vito sits down in a small chair and his feet slightly hang above the ground. A character sitting in a chair is often used in this series to represent power. The very first scene of the first film depicts Vito in a position of power from his chair, and the scene just following this one in part 2 puts Michael in a similar position. Even looking at the title card and cover art for The Godfather Part 2 shows off this concept. The ones seated on these thrones are often relaxed and confident. Here though, Vito's feet don't even touch the floor. It shows us how Vito doesn't have any power yet. This immediately clues us into the theme of Vito's story. The prequel segment of this film focuses on Vito Corleone's rise to power. We then transition to the year 1958, where we're introduced to the second half of this story, the continuation of Michael's narrative from the first film. And this opening scene immediately builds a contrast between Vito and Michael's stories. Whereas Vito started from the most humble of beginnings, Michael is currently on top of the world. He successfully moved the family out to Nevada and is currently hosting a party that even has senators in attendance. And this whole scene is a reference to the opening of the first film. In that first film, the party served to build a contrast between both sides of the family. In part 2 though, we already know the deal and very quickly get into setting up the major players in the story. We're introduced to new characters like Senator Geary, Gianniola, and Frank Pantangeli, and we're reintroduced to characters like Kay, Fredo, and most importantly Michael. Another big difference between this scene and the opening to the original Godfather is the problems Vito and Michael face and the ways they deal with them. Vito is faced with smaller issues that aren't based on his own self-interest. Rather, each visitor he sees needs his help and he offers it willingly. As I mentioned in my last video, this helps set up the morally ambiguous nature of his work and the film as a whole. It also helps establish Vito as a truly powerful man. In part 2 though, Michael is struggling with large-scale matters that promote his own interest. He isn't made to look very powerful here. In fact, I would say what the scene does best is establish the fragility of the Corleone Empire. In order of events, Michael is threatened by a senator, Tom is ostracized, Connie is going through a midlife crisis, Fredo is Fredo. A longtime family friend is upset with Michael, and to top it all off, Kay is also upset with him. And Michael's conversation with Kay is particularly of note. This scene establishes 2 things. Kay is pregnant with a child, and she's unhappy with Michael because of the promise he made in the first film about the Corleone family being legitimate in 5 years' time. Apparently it's been 7 years since that promise. This calls to mind the final shot of the first Godfather. Kay was being physically shut out from Michael's business. While she was clearly uneasy, she may still have had faith in his promise. Now though, that faith has disappeared. Aside from Michael's meeting with Gianniola, nothing went his way today. However, if the first Godfather taught us anything, it's that Michael is resourceful and intelligent. The stakes set up in this opening sequence are more so exciting than troubling. We know Michael is a capable character, and we assume that how he navigates these various dilemmas is where a majority of the drama will come from, and that is mostly correct. However, this sequence isn't quite done. An attempt is made on Michael's life, and this makes the primary focus of Michael's plot obvious. While still dealing with all the trouble set up on this day, he also needs to find whoever it was that attempted to take his life. And because of the various meetings he had today, there could be a number of people who are out to kill him. The only thing he can be certain of is the fact the killers had the help of someone within the family. And that's how you get an audience invested. This whole sequence is exciting, and the cinematography and music play a big part in that. The performances here are also top-notch. Al Pacino does a great job all throughout the film, but this sequence is a highlight for me. It's one of the few times we see Michael show weakness and even fear. Yet just after that, he's back to being calm and calculated, appearing to still be one step ahead. Through Michael's conversation with Tom, we're made to believe that Michael is still in control of the situation, and this reassures us of the prior confidence we had in the competence of Michael's character. Now, in making what is essentially two films that are spliced together, the editing has to be on point at all times, and I can confidently say that this is the case here. The stories transition at what feel like natural stopping points, and the switches aren't jarring thematically. For example, Michael now knows what his next move is. He's received his mission, so to speak. He has to leave and find whoever it was that attempted to take his life. Before he does this, he says goodbye to his son and puts him to bed. This is a natural stopping point as we roughly know where we're headed next, and it serves as a good transition back into Vito's story, as Vito is then seen picking his own son up out of his crib. The following section of Vito's story is short, but it seeks to establish two things to the audience. Firstly, the most important thing to Vito is his family. One of my favorite lines from the original Godfather is this one.
You spend time with your family?
Sure I do.
Good. Because a man who doesn't spend time with his family can never be a real man.
And Vito proves to truly live by this philosophy. He plainly says the only thing that matters to him is his wife and son. Even after losing his job, we don't see him have any major reaction. He simply goes home and has dinner with his wife. Spending time with his family is his number one priority. The second thing this section of his story shows us is that Vito is still under the oppressive rule of a Don, even in America. At first, this problem doesn't affect Vito personally, but it's clear Vito is still invested in this matter given his past. And in a sense, he receives his mission as well when his friend tells him that the people have no one to protect them from this man. This is cemented when Vito loses his job because of Don Fanucci. As we transition back into Michael's plot, we finally see this Hyman Roth, who's been mentioned several times up to this point. Apparently, Vito used to do business with him, and he's planning something big with Michael, though we're not sure what that is yet. We soon find out, though, that the then president of Cuba, Fulgencio Batista, is willing to allow Michael and several other families to do their business in Cuba without government interference. Throughout this section of the story, there's plenty of drama, with the rising tension between Roth and Michael playing both sides with Roth and Pentangeli in order to draw out the real culprit. The best plot point from this section, though, is Fredo's betrayal. As an audience, we'd already been made aware of this fact, but the way it's revealed to Michael is extremely clever and fits Fredo's character. Fredo is a character that I felt was underutilized in the first film. He was pathetic for the most part and was kind of just there. The sequel uses that as part of his motivation, though. He's been overlooked his whole life, even by his own father and mother. Michael was given the role of Godfather after Vito's passing, even though Fredo was technically next in line. Clearly, he'd have some ill will about that. After it's revealed that he was the traitor, Fredo claims that he didn't know it was going to be an assassination attempt. But we don't know for sure if this was the case. The film leaves that up to the viewer. And that's actually a common theme here. Just as a brief tangent, there are a lot of unexplained happenings in this story. On one hand, it's cool because it leaves things to the imagination. But on the other hand, the plot can feel very messy at times as you try and make sense of everything. For example, how did the gunmen die after attempting to assassinate Michael? Were they killed by Fredo? They were found outside his room after all. Another thing is the assassination attempt on Pentangeli. Was the attempt botched on purpose in order to get Michael into legal trouble, or was it all just one big coincidence? On top of that, there's the whole plot to kill Michael in the first place. We know this was orchestrated by Roth, but we never find out why. He seemed to have important business for Michael, so why did he try to have him killed? This possibly could have been in order to get revenge for the death of Mo Green in the first film, but maybe not. Again, it's not explained. All of these questions have possible, reasonable answers, we just have no idea what the facts are. I feel this was definitely intentional, but it was an interesting choice. Anyways, back to the scene where Michael actually confronts Fredo about his betrayal. This is one of my favorites in the whole film for a few reasons. Firstly, we rarely see this much emotion out of Michael. We can tell that this really hurt him to his core. Pacino gives a spirited performance, and the tragedy of this moment isn't lost on the audience. The second reason I love it is because of the way it effortlessly ties into real-world history. If the viewer was paying attention during the opening, they'll know this story takes place in 1958. If the viewer was also caught up on their history, they'll know that Fidel Castro came into power on January 1st, 1959. During this whole sequence in Cuba, Michael is uneasy because he's seeing the civil unrest, and this culminates in the New Year's party where he confronts Fredo. If the audience is aware of all these factors, the tension comes from the anticipation. If the viewer is not aware, then the tension comes from the shock of it all. It's a win-win narratively. This really was an insanely creative choice, and it's integrated into the story extremely well. It's frantic, and it doesn't interrupt the already established drama, but rather enhances it. Michael tries to get Fredo to come with him, as Michael already has a plan in order to flee the country, but Fredo doesn't trust him. The strain in their relationship is already evident. And even though Michael promises he's not going to hurt him, we know Michael is not a man that can be trusted. And it's not just this drama with Fredo that's enhanced, but also Michael's deal with Roth is cancelled, which is another major blow. With his plans having fallen through and his brother having betrayed him, Michael now has to flee the country. He eventually returns home, heartbroken and defeated. That wouldn't be all though, as Tom soon tells him that Kay's had a miscarriage. With that, it seems like Michael's officially hit rock bottom. After the complexity and insanity of those events, we transition back to Vito's story. Having been fired from his job, Vito now resorts to theft in order to provide for his family. And this shows us how he became friends with Clemenza and Tessio from the first film. Finucci takes notice of their business though and aims to extort them the same way he does everybody else in this town. Clemenza and Tessio think it best to just pay him what he wants, but Vito has another idea. Quick side note, a small detail I love throughout this section is the fact that Clemenza is always eating. During the scene where they're talking while eating a meal together, Clemenza eats throughout the entirety of the scene, meanwhile Tessio only takes a couple bites. Later on, while on the street, again he's eating while giving Vito the money. Of course, we know what Clemenza will become, so it's a pretty funny detail in retrospect. Anyway, instead of paying Finucci, Vito instead elects to kill him. This may seem extreme, and to an extent it definitely is, but it makes sense for his character. People like Finucci are the reason Vito is even here in the first place. Oppressive Dons took Vito's family, and now to find out the same thing happens here, Vito wants to do something about it. In a sense, he's getting revenge, albeit indirectly. Vito's friend also mentions how the people have no one to protect them. By doing this, Vito saves all those who are being exploited. And this whole ordeal no doubt calls to mind Michael's murder of Sollozzo in the first film. This was absolutely intentional. To me, this signifies the threshold in which the stories of Michael and Vito intersect. Both do the wrong thing for the right reasons. This moment also marked the beginning of their rise to power for each character. The difference is that Vito was able to hold on to this power. Why? We see the reason as soon as Vito exits the scene of his crime. He returns to his family. They're his motivation, and in doing everything for them, he maintained a level of peace despite his lifestyle. And we will see this contrast grow as we look deeper into Michael's story. By this point, we've already been made aware of the essence of this story though. As one Corleone rises, the other falls. To say that Michael had previously hit rock bottom actually wouldn't be true. Now he's getting even closer though, as Billy Cicci and Frank Pentangeli are now testifying against him, aiming to take down his entire empire. Here his crimes in the first film are all thrown at him, with him denying each and every one. With Pentangeli's statement though, Michael would be guilty of perjury, and would thereby lose everything. Before hearing from Pentangeli though, we get the scene where Michael officially confronts Fredo, and we hear Fredo's side of things. It's much of what I stated earlier, but I do want to come back to it, as this is where a majority of the emotional weight of this narrative comes from. John Cazale does an incredible job as Fredo all throughout these films, but this scene is a definite highlight. He tried to have his brother killed. Even though he claims to not know anything about the plot against Michael, we can't readily believe that. Still, as he goes on describing the situation, it's tragic. He's ashamed that his younger brother takes care of him. For once he wanted to do something on his own. He wanted to be recognized. What he's done is unforgivable to Michael though. Michael plainly states that Fredo is nothing to him now. And Al Pacino's line delivery is extremely cold. We can tell that Michael is now completely emotionally detached from this situation. Michael even calmly tells one of his enforcers that he doesn't want anything to happen to Fredo while their mother's alive, and the point is clear. As soon as their mom passes away, Fredo is gone. And this is where a major theme of this franchise reappears. Moral ambiguity was established in the very first scene of the first film, and it's been present ever since. These characters do good things for the wrong reasons, bad things for the right reasons, and everything in between. Some would say that Fredo attempted to have his brother killed, and for that he should pay with his life. Others would say this is unwarranted. Still, others may believe Fredo's side of events, and if that were true, he absolutely should not pay with his life at all. All of this is laid out for us, and the audience can come to their own conclusions on the matter. And while we're yet coming to these conclusions, there are other matters to be resolved. Back to the trial, Pentangeli denies all accusations against Michael, and this twist was shocking on my initial viewing. Admittedly, the courtroom section was the most interesting to me up to this point. I was heavily invested because it was a plot thread that I didn't see coming at all. It's the most visually distinct set piece in the series thus far, and it also reminds us of what's at stake for these characters. After watching these illegal acts for 2 films straight, we may forget just how dangerous their work is, but this reminds us of just how quickly it can all come crashing down. As for why Pentangeli suddenly changed his mind, we're never explicitly told, but we know it had something to do with his brother being present. And this is a case where I vastly prefer this information not being shared with the audience. The mystery surrounding it makes Michael appear even more powerful, which is what makes the following scene one of the most impactful in any film. Kay tells Michael that she's leaving him and taking the children. At first, Kay's perspective is understandable. She had no idea what she was getting into, and Michael broke his promise of having the family go completely legitimate. The events of this trial feel like a natural breaking point for the relationship. After all, it's probably not the best environment to raise kids in either. At first, it seems as though Michael is being extremely manipulative in this conversation. He plainly tells Kay what she will do and continues making the same promises of how he'll change. Eventually though, Michael says something that got me thinking. He says how he could never let her or his kids go. He'd use all his power to prevent that from happening. A man in Michael's position, with all the power in the world, has many means to prevent this from happening. What would it say about Michael's character if he were to simply allow his children to be taken? It would prove that his family isn't the most important thing to him. And to say this is a complicated issue would be putting it lightly. There is one final revelation in this scene though. Kay's miscarriage wasn't a miscarriage at all. It was an abortion. And I don't think a single twist in any film has been this impactful to me before. Now obviously abortion is a complicated subject at the moment, but regardless of your personal opinions on the matter, this is an insane turn of events. Make no mistake, the only reason she got this abortion was to hurt Michael. She wanted to cut him so deeply so as to sever any ties to him or the Corleone family. And this is obviously unforgivable to Michael. Al Pacino's performance here is yet again fantastic. Every time Michael lets his guard down, Al Pacino makes evident the intensity of feeling required to accomplish this. The face he makes towards Kay is genuinely terrifying, and as she continues speaking, it only grows in intensity. Diane Keaton's performance is also noteworthy here. All the way up until she reveals this truth, you can tell she's holding something back. And when Michael brings up her miscarriage, her demeanor completely changes. Adding another wrinkle to the moral conundrum these characters face is Michael's reaction to this information, as he suddenly lunges at Kay and punches her in the face. The second this scene ended, I had to pause the movie and simply consider what I just saw. Unpack the layers of the events that just unfolded. And in the end, I still can't determine right and wrong with certainty. This scene is going to elicit different reactions from different people, and with the ever-changing political climate, people are even more passionate about the issues presented. All I can say is this. Watch the films for yourself before drawing a conclusion. There's something to be said for the added context and layers of nuance presented within them that weren't discussed here. Suddenly the scene transitions to yet another flashback with Vito. Vito goes back to Sicily in order to exact revenge on the man who killed his father, mother, and brother. Interestingly though, he took his family with him. This further emphasizes the contrast between Michael and Vito at similar points in their lives. While Michael put his business first and is now losing his family, Vito put his family first while he pursued his own personal business. And even this revenge, it could be said, is for the sake of his family. The juxtaposition between the characters is clear. Yet again, while one Corleone rises, the other falls. Soon after all this, Michael's mother passes away, and as we know, Fredo is now liable to be killed at any moment. Connie begs for him not to kill Fredo, however, and instead to forgive him. So Michael appears to do just that. He hugs Fredo in front of everyone at their mother's funeral. For a second, it almost seems as though he has perhaps forgiven him. It's an emotional moment and a big change for the character. Forgiveness didn't seem to be in Michael's nature. The music swells, but as the scene cuts to Michael's facial expression, we're reminded of just who he is. Immediately the music dies down as Michael shoots a look at one of his enforcers. Michael is not capable of forgiveness. There are two major references to the ending of part 1 here. The first is this shot of Michael shutting the door on Kay. However, this time there's a sense of finality to it, as Michael is the one shutting the door himself. The second reference is the massacre of Michael's perceived enemies, but the tone is completely different here in part 2. In part 1, yes, it was murder, but the tone was triumphant. These were all men who were scheming to have Michael killed, and if they weren't all taken out, someone would have sought revenge. All of it was in the best interest for the family. In part 2 though, this is anything but triumphant. No one poses a threat to the Corleone Empire, but Michael is not capable of letting their transgressions go. One by one, Roth, Pentangeli, and even Fredo are killed. It's violence for the sake of violence, and the contrast makes Michael's arc throughout these films evident. Michael started out in part 1 as a quiet, nice guy. He didn't plot or scheme. He was content with it simply being him and Kay. Through the events of that story though, Michael descended from a war hero and a good man to a mob boss and a murderer. There though, you could make the argument that he simply became what his family needed him to be. He did bad things for unselfish reasons. You cannot make that argument for the events in part 2 as he descends even further. We saw a man's fall from grace in part 1 and cheered as he established this new version of himself. and now as he continues down this path, we're incapable of cheering. Often people look to fiction because they believe more beauty to be found in it. Being able to curate the events to your liking is a power most individuals crave. In a narrative, there is nuance and foreshadowing, which is to say nothing is random in a story. A sometimes overlooked element of storytelling, though, is the ending. I'd argue endings are what makes stories so powerful. It gives a sense of finality, something we are incapable of feeling in life. I wholeheartedly believe that one of the greatest tragedies of life is that it doesn't end. Now, obviously life ends, people die, but the story doesn't end for the people around them. It just continues until the next tragedy. To illustrate this concept, consider this example. Suppose two teenagers are dating. The couple go on to face a series of tests and pressures from various sources, but eventually they pull through and get married. Years go by, they seem happy, maybe even have kids. That's happily ever after, right? And a story it might be. We already had our rising action, climax, and epilogue. However, life just continues. Imagine now the man goes on to cheat on the woman. Immediately, there goes the happy ending. See, depending on where you place the finish line, this story is either a fairy tale or a tragedy. But in life, there is no goalpost or finish line. You can never succeed enough to prevent failure. And this movie adapts that dark philosophy extremely well. Michael became what he needed to be for his family. And while not quite a fairy tale, Michael did what needed to be done. His story didn't end though. He never stopped changing, until he no longer acted in a way that was forgivable. He took the lives of men who posed no threats to him, one of which was even his own brother, just for the sake of taking out his enemies, as he says. This story is nothing short of a tragedy, and this is solidified in the final shot, where we see an older Michael silently contemplating. No doubt about the events of his life and the consequences of his actions. And we know that he has regrets, because he's still wearing his wedding ring, despite many years seeming to have passed. With no real conclusion to this line of thought, the credits begin to roll. The Godfather Part II is absolutely the best film I've seen in recent memory, and just barely impressed me a bit more than the first film did. While I think Part 1 has a more cohesive, focused narrative, Part 2 had way more impact and emotional weight. Next up, I'll be taking a look at The Godfather Part III. I already know that film's reputation is far worse than these prior two, but from what I've seen, more and more people seem to be coming to appreciate it as time goes on. So I guess I'll be seeing if there's merit to this change of heart, or if the critics got it right. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, let me know in the comments, and subscribe for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching.